Started. My name is Alex Keybl. Thank you for joining me for our session today. I am the director of VR, as just mentioned, at a company called Plex, which is a company that provides a media streaming app solution, so getting all of your content to whatever device you end up actually using. I'm going to be giving about a 15-minute talk, and I'm going to try and give, that's the right one, thank you. I'm going to be trying to give 5 minutes of question and answer at the end, so I'll try and prevent being too long-winded. All right. Oops. All right, so the talk is called We're All Video Game Companies Now, and this is meant to basically highlight the fact that as we all enter spatial computing, regardless of the use cases that our company provides, we're basically running into the same hurdles and problems that video game companies have been traditionally running into. So why should you care? Well, we at Plex, we've made a top 15 mobile VR app, and we've released for a number of virtual reality platforms simultaneously. And we sort of expect you as the audience for this talk to be a part of like a non-gaming software company and interested in getting into spatial computing and looking to learn from some of those people who actually have launched a few products for VR. So what is Plex? Plex is basically like the hub of all of your media content. We currently provide a solution for you to be able to stream your music, your movies, your television, your personal videos from your computer at home to any device, whether it's an Apple TV or an iPhone. And we basically make a promise to our users that we're going to be there and available as a client on any device that they provide, which sort of brings us to Plex VR. So you're coming through on that promise. We have provided a client for Plex for virtual reality. And our goals in creating this client were to make it as interactive, comfortable, and social as possible. So you can kick back and watch The Simpsons with somebody from across the world or on your own. And we make it as comfortable as possible with a movable and resizable screen. And yeah, we're providing the Plex experience plus 360-degree video, 3D video, et cetera. So why did we invest in virtual reality? Well, there's a couple of reasons. First and foremost, Oculus and Google both reached out to us about making a client for virtual reality. It was high on a lot of their users' wish lists. And we also found out that over 80% of mobile virtual reality usage is actually video playback. So it was super compelling for us to get involved, but we wouldn't get involved with virtual reality or mixed reality if we didn't also believe in the platform and the technology as a whole. So from our perspective, VR is really like headphones for your eyes. This is a bit of a flashback to SAT prep, I suspect, but you know, we really think that what headphones does for music and audio in general, that's what VR is doing for our eyes. So you know, we see this as being an inevitability, and that's the reason why we see VR going mainstream with standalone headsets like the Oculus Go now. I do like to think about where we are in virtual reality sort of metaphorically compared to smartphones. I think this is why a lot of us are involved in mixed reality. We sort of saw the mobile computing generation come and probably go in the next few years, and we want to definitely be involved in the next wave. So, you know, I sort of see in the smartphone computing timeline, existence was the Treo coming out. It had apps, it had wireless connectivity, and it basically was a full-fledged smartphone. But not until the iPhone did Apple provide a comfortable enough solution with a large screen, colorful apps, well-designed software, and they finally got mass user acceptance despite the price of the iPhone. Mass business acceptance didn't happen until the App Store for the most part. So where are we now sort of on this timeline when it comes to virtual reality? Well, I'd suggest that we're somewhere between existence and comfort right now, and I'm going to show you where I think we are in terms of these milestones for the different hardware. So existence was obviously the Oculus dev kits a few years back. Comfort and mass acceptance, it's still upcoming, right? So it might be the Project Santa Cruz, it might be the rumored Apple VR platform, but it's definitely coming up. It sounds like it's on the order of a year or a little bit more. And then mass business business acceptance is probably not going to be the App Store. We already have that for all of our VR platforms. It's going to be the tools and frameworks necessary to make it really easy to develop immersive experiences outside of just video games. So, I highlighted comfort as being super important on the previous slide for mass user acceptance. So we're all aware of the problems of virtual reality, whether they're physical, visual, or software. We've tackled a bunch of the problems in virtual reality physically, like the head straps being uncomfortable or the nose foam or overheating. We've resolved that over the last generation or so. Oops. The current generation of standalones is handling a lot of the problems around the wires and sensors being around, needing hardware that's outside of like a desktop computer, for instance. And also upcoming standalones are going to be resolving 6 degrees of freedom with inside-out tracking. So we're resolving a lot of those problems. Oops. And then finally, we're resolving, if you look at Oculus research, things like pixel density, the field of view, binocular vision, et cetera, that's all being resolved. It's all in prototype form right now, obviously, but once it does come out, we expect that that's going to increase comfort a lot. So are we comfortable now? Yeah, for a lot of users, right? So a lot of users, when I say a lot of users, I mean it's about 40 or 50% of of people, consumers in general, are interested in virtual reality. So what happens with the other 50% of people? Well, it's likely they're not going to get involved with mixed reality until augmented reality glasses become a reality. It's a lot of realities. So a lot of people are uncomfortable in virtual reality just from having their vision completely blocked out, having to avoid furniture. I can't really imagine my mom getting too into virtual reality until augmented reality glasses are a thing. And that's fine, and that's a few years away. But so we do expect that basically everybody is going to be in a form of mixed reality over the next 10 years or so. And we agree with the assertion of many speakers over the last year or so that we expect every screen to eventually become virtual. Now, that's not to say that everything in augmented reality with glasses is going to be flat panel screens, and I'm actually going to get to this in a second. There's going to be a lot of immersive experiences that fulfill use cases in spatial computing. But at the very least, for things like laptops, phones, TVs especially, which is important to Plex, we expect that people are going to be spending a lot of the money that they previously spent on these electronics categories on augmented reality glasses instead. So, So we're super excited about that, obviously. We think that it would be an amazing experience, obviously, to be able to place like a large screen TV in any room, regardless of where you are, and to be able to experience that with friends and family members. So a few of the lessons that we've learned along the way. The design shift from 2D to 3D is difficult. It's difficult for software companies especially who don't have experience in 3D application development. We talk a lot about, it's always funny to bring up a Minority Report when we're talking about augmented reality or virtual reality. At the end of the day, the interface that you see Tom Cruise using here isn't much different than like a transparent iPad that's been projected up at scale, right? So that's actually not that compelling, and I would warn against companies basically taking their existing user interfaces that they provide on like the iPhone or the iPad and blowing it up for augmented reality or virtual reality. Oops. And that includes applications like Netflix. You have a screen, you can't really resize it, you're not making use of the fact that you're now in a room with a large space. You can't place it in other places, and the user interface itself is just the TV interface that you currently use if you've got it on your TV. So it's not really making use of the platform, not making it any more immersive than is already possible. So if you're making a video app, for instance, consider bringing back something nostalgic like a Blockbuster, right? Allowing people to actually pull things off the shelves, even if it's just their digital files and they're not able to tactily hold them. It's a much more immersive, much better use of technology, and a much more magical experience if you're able to select things by just pulling them off the shelf, for instance. Another piece of advice is to design for the future. So something we try to do in Plex VR is to design toward AR glasses first and then sort of work our way back. And that ended up sort of molding the way that we thought about the design in general. So that's one of the reasons that we actually broke out the screen from the wall. It's another reason why we took the menu and separated it from the screen. And additionally, the way that you actually interact with the menu and select video files is in preparation for one day being able to just pull them out of thin air in augmented reality. It's also super important to take into consideration the fact that as more and more people get AR glasses or VR headsets, multi-user experiences are super important. If you think about just sitting on the couch with a significant other and just surfing the internet, when you want to show somebody what you're looking at, you just show them the screen that you're looking at, right? Well, in virtual reality or augmented reality, that's something that you obviously need to take into consideration from the beginning. So it's very important that multi-user experiences are built into your application from the ground up, because that can be especially difficult to integrate later on in the software process. And then finally, prepare for the eventuality of hand tracking. So especially once augmented reality glasses are more compelling, it's very likely that we're going to be pressing buttons and pulling things out of thin air. And so while laser pointers seem to be the norm right now in virtual reality and augmented reality, it's unlikely to be the case in the future. So another problem that we ran into and had to conquer was multi-platform virtual reality. So obviously it's pretty segmented. It's confusing to even make an infographic of the different software platforms and sort of what they span in terms of operating systems. So this is something that Plex is particularly good at because we actually do develop for all these different operating systems, but it's also one of the biggest difficulties we've had during development, even from the perspective of creating a build system that supports, putting out applications for all these different operating systems. So, there's solutions coming up in the future, hopefully, either through the OpenXR initiative or potentially with WebVR. But of course, it's our recommendation that when making a virtual reality or augmented reality application, the rules are very similar to those of mobile development. So we definitely recommend native over web for the same reasons as on like iOS or Android. There's App Store presence. There's the ability to make use of all platform features. Basically the same reasons why you would go native previously you should in VR and AR as well. We think mobile is obviously the future of virtual and augmented reality, so it seems like a sort of a no-brainer just in terms of addressable market to go there first. And then Unity for a game engine, we recommend over Unreal just in terms of ability to come to speed for engineers unfamiliar with video game engines and also to make use of contract resources, et cetera, that are out there. It's a much more common game engine for developer experience. One other thing I wanted to point out is that frame rate is the new load time. In applications on our phones, a lot of times we'd worry about how long does it take to get the application in front of the user. Because there's many times drop off. If your application takes a couple seconds, somebody's going to say, I'm just going to open up Facebook instead. Here in virtual reality, it's much more important to address frame rate drops. They make the experience significantly more comfortable, thus allowing the user to remain within your experience and engaged for a longer amount of time. So you're going to end up spending a lot of time optimizing frame rate in your development process. This was the dev time split, just sort of like a rough estimate across all the different elements that went into Plex VR. As I mentioned, performance took the most work for sure. UI was, which I think will be common for non-game pieces of software, was a significant part of the development effort and something obviously most software applications coming to spatial computing for the first time would devote a lot of time to. And then we've got the platform-specific issues that I mentioned on the previous slide with just the general segmentation across all these different operating systems and platforms. And then some more of like the traditional video game elements you do need to spend significant time on, but potentially less than these other categories, including interaction, the environment itself, and multi-user support. So we found that those, while significant, actually took a little bit less time to implement than these other issues. So this is actually, I think, my last slide for the session. What does a minimally viable VR or AR team look like these days? Well, you're going to at least need a developer internal to your company who knows like your APIs, your functions, your typical business goals, and they're probably also going to be the one that keeps the operations sort of more professional engineering-wise. I recommend that you acquire your 3D assets and environment assets outside the company, and that you bring in, a VR and design, product and design person and an external Unity developer. Basically, you want somebody who's had experience within the video game like space, basically, that can sort of guide a new way of sort of thinking about design when compared to like iPad, iPhone, and Android apps. So it's super important to bring these people in from the outside to augment what you've got internally already. And most importantly, you have to give these people autonomy and the freedom to take risks. You don't want to, as I mentioned earlier, have a one-to-one app between your software on a phone and that which you put into a virtual reality or augmented reality experience. And this is something I'm proud to say that Plex has done a great job of with providing autonomy to the virtual reality group within the company. So with that, do we have any questions? We got 2 minutes, a couple questions.
So you just said, you obviously don't put Plex app right into the VR headset, but how do you go about, I'm sure you have a similar, common core shared code that would implement that. Can you talk about how you manage that deployments for that developer?
Sure. So thankfully, we actually had a C# code base internally that did allow us to interface with Plex Media Server as well as like the Plex services that we have up in the cloud. So we did have to adapt it, and we did have to upgrade to a later version of Mono to sort of allow for the port to happen. But yeah, now we're shipping to both the single framework code base to both the VR apps as well as non. We just, like I said, we ended up being lucky that we already had a C# client that we were shipping, so we were able to leverage that. Any other questions? Sure.
You started your talk with kind of some examples of, what a lot of people have, the living room with the flat screen. So it seems like right now it's either that or completely immersive 360. Are you doing one of those? Do you see any group leading kind of like in between, and would it be a platform like yours that would kind of show the way, or would it be a movie house that might kind of demand it?
You're talking about so something in between sort of the flat video experience versus like something more immersive? Is that the content? Right. So I think it's definitely going to be, we're going to see those as like app experiences first. I think everybody's got sort of very specific contributions, and I think we're going to have a lot of unique offerings around immersive video and volumetric video and all of these sorts of things. It's going to be a matter of waiting a couple of years, standardizing it, and then putting it into a product like ours. I think up until that point, I think more of the magic and immersive experiences are going to be more like app-based for the time being. Great. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining my session.